Hello everybody. I have not done one of these types of videos in a long time, so let's get to it. Because what I'm going to do is an unboxing of, and of course I'm going to do a review on this, of Prince and the Revolution Live. And this is not what I'm going to review. I'm just showing this for display purposes because this came out in a couple of releases this year, and I'm going to talk about those, plus I'm going to do a history of Prince and the Revolution Live and the history of home video releases in this particular video. And of course the unboxing will be in the next part. Now of course, as so you know, I've actually liked Prince for a very long time. And of course, recently I actually bought a set that I'm eventually going to do a review on, and that set is the Prince movie collection. There are a few flaws with this one, so I'm going to be explaining what the flaws are in the near future. So now that's out of the way, let's get right to it, shall we? Alright, now I'm going to explain what is Prince and the Revolution Live, because you probably want to know. What is Prince and the Revolution Live? It's a live concert broadcast from the Dome in Syracuse, New York on March 30th, 1985. And this was the first, last, and only time that he ever performed at the Dome in Syracuse, New York. And you are thinking, why am I calling it the Dome? You will find out later. But first, I'm going to talk to you about my history of the Dome, because there's a reason why I'm talking about my history of the Dome. And that is, folks, I've actually been in it. That is right, I've been in it. And I actually went to one concert and a few field trips back in the day. And if you are thinking that the concert that I went to go see is Prince, you're going to find out which concert I actually went to, because I'm going to talk to you about my history of the Dome. So here we go. Alright, now it's time to talk about my history of the Dome. Of course, you already know that I had been inside the Dome a few times. 2 for field trips, 1 for a concert. And if you were thinking that I went to go see Prince in 1985 at the Dome, I didn't. And that is because when Prince performed there, I was only 4 years old, and I didn't know much about Prince at that time. Prince performed there at a time where I didn't know much about him. So as a result, I didn't get to go see him. Had I been older and had known about Prince, I probably would have gotten a ticket to go see him. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go see them due to bad timing. The group that I actually went to go see in concert was performing at the Dome in 1990. And the band that I got to see at the Dome was New Kids on the Block. That is right. I went to go see New Kids on the Block there. That was the first time that I ever been inside the Dome. And it was because of my sister. My sister was a fan of the band at that time. And she still kind of is. But that was a rare time to go see them. And I did get to see them in concert. Even though New Kids on the Block is a good band, they're not at the same level as Prince. I really would have loved to go see Prince, but unfortunately I couldn't see him due to bad timing. So New Kids on the Block was the band that I went to go see, and that was my first time at the Dome, but not my last, because I actually went inside the Dome when I went on field trips, because I used to go on field trips there. And the first time that I ever went inside the Dome for a field trip was, I think, back in 1993. And I got to see the locker rooms, and I got to see the turf inside the Dome. It was pretty awesome, because the Dome is home, of course you probably already know, to Syracuse basketball and football and lacrosse. And I went to go see what was inside the locker rooms, and I got to see the turf, and it was pretty awesome. But that wasn't my only time. The last time I went inside the Dome was back, I think, in 1999. I had another field trip there, and that was pretty fun. And I used to have a Syracuse football program that I got from there, and that was pretty awesome. And that, of course, was my last time at the Dome. So now you know my history of the Dome. Prince performed at the Dome in Syracuse, New York on March 30th, 1985. At that time, the Dome was almost 5 years old and was the home of Syracuse football, basketball, and lacrosse. However, there was a stadium that used to be where the Dome stands now. That stadium was called Archbold. Built in the 1900s and opened in 1907, it was the home of the Syracuse Orangemen. And many players that would be a part of the Pro Football Hall of Fame used to play for the Syracuse Orangemen, and that includes Art Monk, Jim Brown, Larry Zonka, and Floyd Little. However, in the 70s, Archbold was in a bit of a disarray. Things started to go bad for the stadium as it was starting to wear out, and the NCAA was considering putting the team to Division 1AA. So Syracuse made the decision to abandon Archbold Stadium, and in 1978, after 71 years of use, Syracuse played their last game there, and after that happened, the stadium was demolished and replaced by the Dome that stands today. It took 3 years to build it. And in 1980, it opened. However, it needed a name. So Syracuse University got to deal with Carrier, which was a home heating and air conditioning company, to use their name for the dome. And as a result, the Carrier Dome was born. It was the perfect replacement for Archbold Stadium, and it became the new home for Syracuse football. However, football wasn't the only sport that was going to be played at the Dome. Up until 1980, basketball and lacrosse were played in different locations and never in Archbold Stadium. That all changed in 1980 with the opening of the Dome. It became the new home for Syracuse basketball and lacrosse, and it became their home ever since. Syracuse lacrosse has had quite a bit of national championships, and Syracuse basketball has even had a national championship ever since the Dome had opened. Even though Syracuse football has not had a national championship since the days of Archbold, it had a couple of bowl games that they've won. However, the Dome has been home to also concerts. The first ever concert was played in 1980, and the first artists that ever played there were Frank Sinatra and Wayne Newton. However, there hasn't been as much concerts as there used to be at the Dome. That's because of a couple of places in Syracuse. One is Chevrolet Court at the New York State Fair, which usually plays concerts in the summertime, and the Amphitheater, which plays concerts usually at the summertime. But concerts are still being done at the Dome to this day. The last concert that was done recently was, of course, on June 4th, 2022. And the person that performed there was Paul McCartney. Syracuse football, basketball, and lacrosse have played their home games at the Dome to this day as well. However, there have been changes made to the Dome this decade. In 2020, the Dome got a complete makeover, and there have been several renovations since. However, the biggest change came in 2022. Syracuse University's deal with Carrier had expired, and Syracuse University decided to go with a different company. So as a result, Syracuse University couldn't use the Carrier name anymore. Syracuse University went with a deal with JMA Wireless to use their name. And on May 19th, 2022, the Dome was renamed from the Carrier Dome to the JMA Wireless Dome, which has been the name ever since, or the JMA Dome for short. So now you know why I called it the Dome instead of the Carrier Dome. And that is because I can't use the Carrier Dome name anymore, because it's now called the JMA Wireless Dome, because Syracuse University decided not to continue with Carrier. And it's a real shame. The Dome should be called the Dome, because if you're not going to go with one particular company until the Dome is demolished, then what's the point of calling it anything besides the Dome? What's the point? May 19th, 2022 was an end of an era, and it's a real shame that Syracuse University decided to discontinue with Carrier. Back in late March of this year, there was an announcement made for Prince and the Revolution Live, and that it was coming to CD, Blu-ray, and vinyl for the very first time. Back then, the dome was called the Carrier Dome. But when the CD, vinyl, and Blu-ray were released on June 3rd, the dome was called the JMA Wireless Dome. End of an era, folks. End of an era. But that's enough of this. I will say that I will say the Carrier Dome name when I'm talking about the Prince concert. But I will say it's now called the JMA Wireless Dome. So now let's talk about the history of Prince before the Purple Rain Tour and during the Purple Rain Tour, and how this concert that was broadcasted live came to be. Prince's early career started in the 1970s, where he was developing his talents as a singer and as a performer. And it led to a demo tape which got the attention of several different record companies. Prince decided to sign with one of those record companies, and the company that he signed with was Warner Brothers Records. And in 1978, he released his first album, For You. The album wasn't a success, but it did chart on several different album charts. His first single, Soft and Wet, did chart on several different singles charts. However, it wasn't until 1979 where he scored his first ever hit, I Want to Be Your Lover, from his second album, Prince. Why You Want to Treat Me So Bad also kind of became a hit when it actually charted on the R&B charts at number 13. Unfortunately, there were no hit singles for Prince in 1980 and 1981. However, there were a few songs that did do well on the R&B charts, including Uptown and Controversy. However, in 1982, things all changed. Prince released his breakthrough album, 1999, which included a couple of hit singles, including the title track, Delirious, and Little Red Corvette. However, it wasn't until 1984 where he went from breakthrough artist to superstardom, when Purple Rain was released. And it was released in a couple of ways. Prince decided to do a movie, and it would be a theatrical one. And he would also make a soundtrack for that album. The movie became a box office success, and the album became his first number one album and produced quite a bit of hits as well, including Let's Go Crazy, When Doves Cry, and the title track. And this led to a huge tour. The tour started on November 4th, 1984 in Detroit, Michigan. And it would continue on until April 7th, 1985 in Miami, Florida at the Orange Bowl. The Purple Rain Tour was a US-Canada only tour with no international dates besides Canada, and Prince decided to end the tour early because he had already had an album in the can that he wanted to release after April 7, 1985. That album was Around the World in a Day. That immediately became a problem because European fans wanted to see his tour, And WDR, which is a network in Germany, wanted to bring him on during the Purple Rain tour for Rock Plus, which is a concert program that has live performances for European audiences. Prince had agreed to go on Rock Plus in West Germany before the tour was even finished. Those plans were scrapped. As a result, WDR and Prince had to think of another plan to get his performance to European audiences. He decided to do Rock Night, which includes live performances by 4 artists in one day. He also decided to do his performance via satellite from the US. Rock Plus Rock Night was scheduled for March 30th, 1985. There was only one venue that was perfect for Prince's live performance to European audiences via satellite. That venue was the Carrier Dome in Syracuse, New York. Prince agreed, and 8 cameras were brought to the Carrier Dome in Syracuse, New York. The filming was done by Unitel Productions. And on March 30th, 1985, Rock Night officially happened on the WDR network in West Germany. 4 artists performed that night. This German artist, which I don't know how to pronounce, Paul Young, which had a hit later in 1985 in the United States, Every Time I Go Away, Al Jarreau, which later did the theme song to Moonlighting, and finally, the main event, Prince, live via satellite from Syracuse, New York. Rock Night was a success, and it led to more Rock Nights in the near future. However, despite it being broadcasted live from the US, it was never broadcasted live in the US, either by a pay TV channel like HBO or closed circuit TV. That is right, I said closed circuit TV because this was before pay-per-view television happened. Pay-per-view television did not happen until later in 1985. Back when the Prince concert happened, there was only closed circuit TV, where you could go to a venue and buy a ticket and watch that particular event on a big screen television. And that was the only option to watch events at the time. There were certain times where you could watch a certain event at the comfort of your own home, and HBO did something like that, but that was only a few times. Most events were done via closed circuit television, and that's how it was back when Prince performed his concert. On March 31st, 1985, the day after the Prince concert, the World Wrestling Federation did a live broadcast at Madison Square Garden via closed circuit television, the very first WrestleMania, which ended up being a massive success and eventually led to the creation of pay-per-view television, and it would spawn many more WrestleManias for years to come. Now, if Prince would have did a live broadcast in the United States via closed circuit television of the Syracuse, New York concert, it probably would have been successful because he was the highest selling artist at that time, and Purple Rain was a huge success. And a live concert via closed circuit television would have been a huge draw for him, and it would have sold tickets. And had he had done a closed circuit television broadcast in the US live via satellite from Syracuse, it would have been a massive success. Unfortunately, that did not happen, and the only people that got to see it live in the US were the people that bought tickets for the Carrier Dome concert. And everybody else in the United States was left in the dust. However, for people in the United States, all hope was not lost. because several months later, it got a home video release called Prince and the Revolution Live. And it was for the first time ever, people in the United States got to see the live concert broadcast. And it was available in multiple formats, including VHS, Beta, and Laserdisc. It wasn't available on CED because that was around the time CEDs were being phased out. So that didn't get a CED release. And in Japan, there was a VHD release. And that format was only available in Japan. Prince and the Revolution Live was a pretty successful home video release, as it was a really popular release that it ended up selling well, and it ended up being nominated for a Grammy. Alright, I'm going to stop right here for the home video releases and go on to the articles that I want to read. Now, first off, I want to let you all know that the 1985 release of Prince and the Revolution Live was the last separate home video release until 2022. There hadn't been a separate home video release of Prince and the Revolution Live up until this particular year. And I know what you're thinking. I didn't talk about the 2017 DVD release. Well, first off, the only way to get the DVD release is by buying the Ultimate Collector's Edition of Purple Rain. You cannot get Prince and the Revolution Live separately on DVD. This is the only way to get it. That's the reason why I didn't count it. So there you go. But I do have it, just to let you know. So now it's time for the articles that I read. And the first article that I'm going to read is from 2017, and it's by Jeff Herbert. Now, the first article that I'm reading, and here's what he said. The performance was recorded at the Carrier Dome on March 30th, 1985, and aired on live television to more than 12 million viewers in Europe through Eurovision. Now, Eurovision was the outlet for different European markets, and they were the ones that broadcasted the concert from that one particular network. And as a result, people in Europe got to see it. But that's not what I'm talking about. Because he also says, but has long been only available as a bootleg in VHS broadcast quality. Now, I'm going to say this. Is it true or false? It's both true and false. Because the thing about it is, if he was talking about any VHS release, no, it's never been bootlegged on VHS. Because the thing about it is, the VHS release is available. There's a VHS release that, like I mentioned, I talked about the different formats that released Prince and the Revolution Live. It's on multiple formats. And of course, at the time he wrote this, it had just been out on DVD. And what he could have researched was the home video release to make sure that he was correct. Because that don't mean that the home video releases weren't available. They could have been available on eBay and stuff. Because the thing about it is, there were people that sell VHSs and they sell betas and whatever not. So as a result, the VHS release is not really a bootleg. So, and the only way the show was bootlegged was because there was no DVD release, and people probably bootlegged that particular release from the home. The particular bootleg on DVD was probably from the home video releases. So somebody probably just ripped it from a VHS or Laserdisc. It could be any past format that released the concert. So, and that's probably why we got bootlegs of the concert on DVD. But the thing about it is, with the 2017 release of Purple Rain Ultimate Collector's Edition, now that's not possible because the thing about it is, you can now get it on DVD. Even though it's not separately released on DVD, you can still get it on DVD with the Ultimate Collector's Edition of Purple Rain. So his statement's kind of true and kind of false. If he was talking about DVD releases and he thought that the show was bootlegged, we put on DVD, it's possible. But the thing about it is, when it comes to the VHS releases, it was never bootlegged. So it's kind of true and it's kind of false. So that's all I really got to say about that. So it's kind of true and it's kind of false. So next article. And this is the last article that I read. And surprisingly enough, it came out this year actually on May 23rd, 2022. And of course, there's a couple things he said that I'm going to talk about. Now, what Mark Kennedy writes, he says the gig was an early pay-per-view event. And guess what? That's false. It was never on pay-per-view, because the only pay-per-view at the time, before there was even pay-per-view television, was closed-circuit TV, and that never happened. Had it been on closed-circuit TV like I mentioned, it probably would have been successful. Unfortunately, there was no closed-circuit television of the live broadcast in the United States or in any other country. When it was broadcasted live, it was actually broadcasted and it was free for people that lived in Europe. They got a good deal because it was free to air, and the Prince concert was available for them. So as a result, it wasn't a pay-per-view gig. And I think Mark Kennedy should have did a little more research before putting that down, because that's definitely not true. It was never on closed-circuit television. It was never on a pay TV station. So as a result, his statement about that is false. Now there's one more thing that he states that I want to talk about. Here's what he wrote. The concert was later put out on VHS, but the quality of the audio and visuals were poor. Well, I'm not going to argue with that, but what Mark doesn't know, that this concert was released before 2017 on multiple formats. It was released on beta and Laserdisc as well. And the best quality format, and that's in terms of video and audio quality, was Laserdisc. The only problem with Laserdisc is that you had to flip the disc every single time. And that was the main reason why VHS ended up beating Laserdisc. And that's because VHS was a quantity format over a quality one, where beta was a quality format and not a quantity one. And that was the main reason why VHS won the format war back in the day, and even beat Laserdisc. But the thing about it is, the best quality video and audio was Laserdisc. And the concert that was released was available on Laserdisc. So someday, hopefully, Mark, you will get yourself a Laserdisc player, and hopefully you will buy the concert on Laserdisc to see the audio and video quality, which is most likely in broadcast quality. So there you go. There's multiple formats besides VHS. VHS wasn't the best video quality format to begin with. Laserdisc was. And that's all I really got to say about that. That's all the articles that I talked about. If you want to check out the articles for yourself, links are down below in the description box. So now it's time to go back to our regularly scheduled program.